We're in volume 5 of the Bible story. Yeah, the lighting's different because got my window. The sunlight's coming in. Okay, part 1, story 8, the Stolen Vineyard. Okay, King Ahab was a very rich man, as the wealth was counted in his day. He owned at least 2 palaces, one in Samaria and one in Jezreel. The one in Samaria was known as the Ivory House, its walls being decked with polished ivory carved from the tusks of elephants. Excuse my reading. I'm Southern and and reading was not my best subject in school. But with all his riches, Ahab was not a happy man. Like many boys and girls today, he was always wanting more. If someone had something better than he possessed, he felt envious and miserable. One day, looking out the window of the palace in Jezreel, he eyed his eyes roamed over the beautiful vineyard that that adjacent to adjacent the royal lands. The thought occurred to him that it would make a fine addition to the palace gardens, and he made up his mind to buy it. Going over to the owner, whose name was Naboth, he offered to give him another vineyard in exchange for the one, or, if he preferred, to pay the worth of it in money. It was a fair enough offer, but Naboth didn't want to sell. The vineyard had been his father's, he said, and his grandfather's. Indeed, it had belonged to his family more years than he could tell, and he couldn't bring himself to part with it. At this, Ahab was very much upset, and when he got back to his palace, he behaved like a spoiled child. Throwing himself on his bed, he turned his face to the wall, and refused to eat. Yeah, very childish. When he didn't come down for dinner that evening, Queen Jezebel went to his room to find out what was the matter. "Why are you so sad?" she said. "Why won't you eat?" Then he told her how he offered to buy Naboth, Naboth, Naboth's vineyard, and the man refused to sell it. And then it has a picture of him standing with his fist like pounding. To me, it looks like it. There it is. Pounding because the vineyard and him wanting it. Okay. Go to the next page. And then it says, Jezebel scoffed. That's fine to be a, that's fine, that, that's a fine thing to be miserable about, she said. In other words, aren't you king? Can you do what you like? Get up, eat, and be merry. If you want that vineyard, you can get it. I'll get it for you. Ahab did what he was told, and Jezebel set about getting the vineyard for him in her own wicked way. She wrote to the heads of the council and told them to proclaim a fast and set Naboth on high among the people. Then They were then to call in 2 false witnesses who would testify that Naboth had blasphemed God and the king. After hearing the evidence, they were to find Naboth guilty and have him stoned to death. It was simple as that, and as evil. With all the city officials already sold out to Jezebel and afraid of their lives, poor Naboth didn't have a chance. The court was summoned, and the 2 witnesses came in and accused Naboth of blasphemy. 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 Ugh. My tongue gets tired. Y'all forgive me. In vain he protests his innocence. In vain he swore that he never uttered blasphemy in all his life, either against God or the king. The judges accepted the testimony of the 2 witnesses and condemned him to death. He was then carried out of the city and stoned. But if Jezebel and Ahab thought they were going to get away with this wicked murder, they were mistaken. That very day that Ahab walked into Naboth's vineyard to take possession of it, who should be there but Elijah, whom he had last seen running before his chariot on the stormy night after fire had fallen from heaven on Mount Carmel, and then the prophets of Baal had been slain. Hast thou found me, O enemy mine? He cried in a startled voice. I found thee, replied Elijah sternly, because thou hast sold thyself to work evil in the sight of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, hast thou killed and also taken possession? In the palace where the dogs lick the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick thy blood, lick thy blood, even thine. Concern Jezebel, he said, the dogs shall eat Jezebel by the walls of Jezreel. Elijah could not have spoken more frankly. Certainly Ahab was left in no doubt as what God through the thought of the murder of Naboth. We may be sure that he never got a moment's pleasure out of that stolen vineyard. Every time he walked in it, he must have wondered whether Elijah was hiding somewhere among the vines, waiting to condemn him again for his evil deed. Every time he looked at it from his palace window, he must have thought of the price both he and Jezebel would have to pay for it someday. Such a bitter fruit of envy, jealousy, and selfishness. And then, of course, it has a picture of the meeting. Here it is. And let's see what the next page holds. And that was the end of story part 1, story 8. And like always, it's the break time. So I'm going to take a break, and then I'll be back in a minute.